Delighted to be joined now by my next guest, Mayor of Greater Manchester, former Labour Health Secretary Andy Burnham. Good morning to you, Andy.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. So what did you make of the Prime Minister's roadmap? Do you agree with the 46% of the public who, according to YouGov, say the balance is about right, the 26% who think it's too quick, or the 16% who think it's too slow?
I'm probably in the 46%, Julia. I think the balance is broadly right. The case rate in England is still quite high. You have to bear that in mind. And we have new strains around which pose a new risk. So I think the balance is broadly right here. There are some things, though, that I would have done differently. I think the plan for schools is risky, unnecessarily so. And there's this problem of them still not fixing self-isolation support. Your listeners may remember Dido Harding saying a couple of weeks ago, 20,000 people every day are contacted, asked to self-isolate, but then say they can't afford to do so. In Greater Manchester, that's 1,000 people every day with the virus going into work. You know, how much longer are they going to leave this problem sort of unfixed? Because, you know, that poses a risk to the plan. If you don't stop the spread in workplaces, this plan may collapse.
You say the case rate is still quite high. I mean, it's plummeted 80%. Since the peak. We've now got the vaccine rollout. We now know from all the data, if we're following data, not dates, that actually, you know, both the AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines give phenomenal protection from the risk, not even just of death, but of hospitalisation, so serious illness. Why are we concerned about, even if, I mean, I don't think the case rate is high, but even if the case rate were too high, if people aren't dying or getting seriously ill, why would we continue the lockdown?
Well, people are dying and getting seriously ill, and the pressure in hospitals is still much greater right now than pretty much anything we saw last year. And the case rate, I think England average around 130, higher in a lot of places. That's way above Leicester.
It's about the case rate. The estimates now it's about 1 in 200.
The per 100,000 population. So the case rate that everyone's using, of course, is the cases per 100,000 population. It's about 130, I think, for England at the moment, higher in other places. That's way above Leicester, when Leicester went into the first local lockdown last year. So I think it's broadly right, Julia. I think the government is right to be cautious, but it's right to set out a plan. It's good that there is no return to the regional tiers. That was something we were very much calling for. But I think there are risks to the plan. There's a risk posed by the schools. There is a risk posed by the lack of self-isolation support. And I still don't understand why they always give permission to non-essential retail to open before hospitality. I think non-essential retail poses more risks to spread than hospitality. And I struggle.
What are you doing in shops that poses a risk to in terms of COVID spreading? Well, I'm fascinated what people are actually doing in shops, because I just go into shops, stay 2 meters apart from people, buy my stuff and leave. What's happening in shops when you go in?
Well, that might be okay from your perspective where you are, Julia, but I think other people would say it's hard to keep distance in shops and supermarkets. A lot of people talk about feeling that their space isn't maintained, and it's not the same structured environment, is it, as a hospitality environment where you've got tables and you've got the arrangements in place to keep the distance. I think one of the drivers of the infection before Christmas was non-essential retail, and I just think the ability of people to keep their distance in the retail environment is much lower. And I'm just surprised that it's got a big green light again from April.
Again, I'm just not sure what shops you're going in. I mean, I was talking to the manager of my local supermarket who said that they have complaints of people complaining. Well, when I came in yesterday, it wasn't as busy as it is today. And as he's pointed out, what are you doing coming in 2 days in a row if you're so worried about supermarkets? If you're more responsible, you'd come in once a week rather than coming in every day. So you wouldn't have to be so many people in the shops. But let's go back to schools. You twice now said you think that it's risky for schools to go back. What do you think is risky about schools returning on March the 8th?
What I'm saying is risky is the Big Bang approach, so bringing everybody back on the same day, and colleges as well. I think that is a risk that we don't need to take, given the case rate that I mentioned before and the new strains. I think it would be more sensible to bring the priority year groups into secondary schools on the 8th of March, so in secondaries, year 11, year 10, and then have a more gradual return. And
And what difference would that make?
It would give schools a time to make sure all of their testing systems were bedded down. it would give an ability of the school staff to see whether there has been any rise in cases, whether there is any flickering up of the case
And
rate.
if there's a rise in cases, then we close the schools again?
Not necessarily.
So what difference does it make then?
It's just a more careful approach, isn't it?
It feels more careful. It doesn't actually make... How does it make it any more careful? If you're not going to close the schools if the case rates go up a bit, what difference does it make?
You could bring a whole school back on the 8th of March and then you could have to close the whole school.
Why?
On the 15th of March.
Why would you have to do that?
Because there's an outbreak, because the new strain can move very quickly through communities, as we've seen in Moss Side recently and in North Manchester. These new strains are more transmissible.
Andy, you're a former health secretary. You know perfectly well there are many, many different strains, many mutations of every virus, and you'll also know that that many of these, many of them actually don't move more quickly through different populations. But even if they do, even if more children did get infected as a result of going to school, one issue is that they are highly unlikely to become ill, highly unlikely to transmit it to their teachers, as we know, because we've seen that teachers are at no greater risk than other professions from the data. We're following data now, apparently. But also the risks of children being at home, the mental health issue, the physical issues of them not socialising, not having exercise, doing sport, and all the other aspects of school life, quite apart from just actually learning anything, and the issues in terms of disadvantages, poorest kids doing the worst as a result of that home learning. But those risks are far higher than some children catching a virus which gives them nothing more than a little bit of a cough, if that.
It's a judgment call, isn't it? I mean, you're saying the risks to kids aren't very high.
I'm not saying it. No, the data says it.
Okay, no, I'm agreeing with you on that point. But what I am also saying, though, is those kids live with people, mums or dads with underlying conditions, or brothers.
Well,
and
maybe
sisters.
maybe those children should stay at home then, if their parents are so worried.
Of course, there are teachers and support staff in the school who may be at greater risk. So, but I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, Julia.
You're saying the schools is risky. It's unnecessarily risky for children to go back to school.
We need to bring kids back as soon as safely possible. All I'm saying to you
is... Andy, sorry. No, you said it was unnecessarily risky to bring schools back the way it is, and you're saying that a big bang, same day, all of that is risky. It needs to be when it's safe to do so. What does that mean?
So I'm saying to you, bring the other year groups back on a rolling programme so that the whole approach to bringing kids back to school can be done more carefully. Bringing everybody back on the same day, in my view, exposes everybody to greater risk, and I think it should be more managed than is being proposed. But I'm just giving you my view. You clearly don't agree with it.
But I don't know what basis. If you're not going to be closing schools down because infections go up, then what difference does it make whether they're all back or not? What do you make of kids having to, in secondary school, having to wear masks in the classroom instead of just in the hallways?
I think that's a bit too much, to be honest with you. I mean, I think once kids are in the classroom at their desk, obviously not moving around, and you would hope distance, I'm not quite sure why they're insisting on that. And if there is a wider concern, it suggests, Julia, that I'm right, doesn't it not, that there's a wider safety concern about schools and a need to tighten the measures within school to prevent spread. Well, doesn't that also therefore mean they should look again at the vaccination programme and opening that up to teachers and support staff? If they're going down this route of bringing everybody back on the same day, it follows, therefore, I think, that they have to look at extra safety measures, and that's presumably why they're looking at masks. Well,
it just, of course,
they need to look at vaccination again. That's the whole point, isn't it? This is clearly a riskier thing to do than bringing year groups back on a phased basis.
It's clearly just a sop to those who think that it's a risky thing to do, and it's just, we'll give them a bone by making kids wear masks for a few weeks because it'll make them happier.
Well, I don't think it's that. I think overall the government has got this broadly right, as I've said. You know, this is a difference of opinion about how you bring schools back. We all want to bring schools back. It's a difference of opinion about how you do it. Broadly, the government is following the evidence and the data. It's not doing the big bang return across the economy and the Eat Out to Help Out we saw last year. It's not going back to regional tiers. It's learning the lessons of 2020. I'm coming on your programme this morning to say I think the government has got this broadly right, and they should be congratulated for that, because that I think offers a plan for the country that can see us now exit this pandemic.